Better health, better care, lower cost. Everyone's talking about healthcare, but how much do you know? Better Health is brought to you in part by Sleep Better Northwest. Explore the healthcare system and listen to experts with your host, Sue Lonnie Madsen, here on Better Health.
Welcome to this edition of Better Health. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, I have two guests today from Psychiatric Solutions, a new practice based in Spokane Valley, Bethany Osgood and Joe Judd. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I understand you have a lot of good information to share with us today, and I think we could start with some of the statistics. And one is just that most 1 in 5 Americans are affected by mental health conditions, and we don't think about that. Most everybody knows somebody perhaps quite close to them who is affected by a mental health condition. Mm-hmm. And so what do you find in your practice?
I think especially in the last few years, we've seen kind of a continual increase in the number of folks that are experiencing mental illness. And you mentioned the 1 in 5, and I think it goes beyond just, it used to be that you knew somebody that had a mental illness. Now most of the time people have someone in their family, someone much closer to them that they're experiencing. So it's becoming one of those things that people are experiencing much more on a personal level rather than it being somebody else, mm-hmm. that they know about. And because of that, I think it's led to more understanding and recognition that there is a need for treatment out there, but I think there's still a long way to go.
Well, I think recognition may be a piece of that. I'm not sure that it would be really difficult to prove that there was more or less, but there's certainly a better recognition.
Absolutely.
And instead of just, that person's a little odd, now we try and make sure that they have the right support. So what are some of the things that we want to be looking for to be able to reach out and help folks?
Yeah. That's such an important concept. Is at Psychiatric Solutions, we really want to encourage talking about the stigma or having the conversation. Mm-hmm. The whole point of Mental Health Awareness Month is really starting to have those open conversations and squash the stigma of, we can't talk about mental health. An example is if you had a broken arm, mm-hmm. you would go in and you would see a physician and get it x-rayed and casted, and they would take care of you for the length of that. When we have mental health issues, it's not so cut and dry as a broken arm. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes there's hush tones, somebody has depression, or mm-hmm. It's not very clear cut. And when we start to have those conversations, we break the stigma and we're able to address mental health in the same way, with the same openness as fixing a broken arm or fixing a car accident. As it truly is happening, it truly is a real condition, and the conversation breaks the dam so that we can talk about it in an open forum, talk about treatment, and those 1 in 5 statistics that you were talking about, somebody we know, we work with in our family, that we can get them the help that they really truly need.
So we need to stop thinking about like a character flaw, and it just is.
Mm-hmm.
And there mm-hmm. are some things we can do about it. But what are some of the signs that one might look for to be able to start that conversation?
Great.
Well, it's a great question, and I think a lot of times the signs that people look for may vary because people come from different backgrounds, different personalities. They may look different with different people, and so I think those that are close to someone kind of know when something looks out of the ordinary for them, and I think that's really so. It's hard to say it looks the same for everybody, but I think when we see family members who really start to withdraw, they're really mm-hmm. spending more and more time on their own, and they don't want to be around other people because
especially when that hasn't been an issue before.
Correct. And it can also changes in patterns of behavior. Doing things that they used to love to do, they're maybe not doing those things anymore. And again, it's just kind of a shutting down of the things that the person they used to know is just changing very differently and beyond what you would expect in normal life circumstances. So I think those are some of the signs that we can look for. And as we've been talking about, we can find those things out really by talking to each other. Well, so what's going on, and what are you seem different, or you seem withdrawn, or and just being okay to talk about those things, mm-hmm. even in a work setting, I think is important because a lot of times people, that's Bethany mentioned, it's kind of a taboo. I don't want to. That's too personal, mm-hmm. and I don't want to. it's about people. We need to be okay with talking to each other and asking, hey, can I help? You look like you're kind of struggling with things right now.
Absolutely.
I know one of the things we discussed earlier on a program talking about suicide is that it's so easy to just say, so how are you? Well, I'm fine. But to really look somebody in the eye and say, how are you really doing today? Because something seems a little off. I mean, that's a completely different kind of conversation.
It's really about having those conversations, and people are experiencing the mental health. It comes back down to the person that things to recognize and things for us to see and have those conversations are, maybe I'm not sleeping as well as I used to. Maybe I feel more anxious during the day. Maybe I'm not eating what I used to eat, enjoying the activities, going to the symphony, going to our soccer games, or having those conversations, tea with a friend, and we're starting to withdraw into ourselves. And it's not good enough any longer to say, oh, you'll get over it, and pat them on the back, pull yourself up from the bootstraps. It's let's have a real open, honest conversation with ourselves and with the people that we're engaging with at work, at home, at friends, so that we can actually find the system or find the treatment to help us get through that. Because we can't fix a broken arm ourselves. And it's okay to seek out that help when you're dealing with a mental health issue such as depression or anxiety or PTSD or other conditions. It's okay now. It's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to seek that treatment.
Yeah, and I think that's a kind of a key message for everyone out there, because there's a lot of you mentioned character flaws. There's a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of, I should just be able to take care of this on my own. And I used to always be happy, and now I can't seem to figure this out. And that's the part that we want people to really start to be okay. It's okay to admit that things aren't going well. It's okay to, be struggling with something, because we see a lot of it around us. And if we can't talk about it, then that leads to that isolation, that leads to that feeling of loneliness, and it just gets worse. So being able to have these open conversations, not just me trying to engage somebody and find out what's going on with them, but if you're someone who is struggling with something, being okay with talking about it and knowing that there's some safe people to talk to about it and have that conversation. Because I think it goes both ways. It's not just asking someone about it, but it's recognizing when you're not doing well, it's okay to talk about it. And that's the important part of getting rid of the stigma. Is these are not character flaws. These are serious problems that are important for people to be able to talk about and deal with.
So you mentioned a little bit about really about self-awareness, that conversation you have internally about how am I doing right now. What are some things that you kind of mentioned some of them that a person might want to acknowledge that something's kind of off? So then what do you do? What does somebody do when they've identified, I am not sleeping very well, and I am not going out like I used to, and it doesn't feel right, and I don't know what it is. So what does somebody do with that recognition of their own symptoms?
That's a wonderful question. First of all, we're going to break the stigma. Second of all, we're going to open up that conversation. And then third is, what can we do for ourselves and others? And there's some things that you can do. We sent you some tips of drinking more water, exercising, getting a little bit more rest, engaging in a spiritual activity, meditation. You can also seek conversations with friends and family or a spiritual nature. Start having that conversation with somebody. Where can I go maybe to talk about this? Because maybe I'm not handling this the way I would like to. I'd like to gain some skills of how to meditate, how to have relaxing thoughts, how to maybe seek out some medication treatment to help me cope and then gain those skills to deal with this. So you can reach out to a counselor or a therapist. You can reach out to Psychiatric Solutions, and we're able to evaluate you. You can do some other self-care, take a hot bath, reach out to your friends and family and I'm just not feeling well. Is this normal? And once you're able to, within yourself or with your group, have that conversation and break the stigma, then you can start seeking the avenues for the help, which is, like I said, self-care, speaking with people, seeking treatment.
Yeah, and we talked about, some of the signs being really that isolation and loneliness and being withdrawn. that obviously then is the opposite of that is talking to people, so that can be difficult.
Right.
But it's recognizing that things aren't going well, and really starting to know that it's okay to reach out, and that really, I think, is where a lot of times people get hung up with, I'm stuck, I need to deal with this on my own. Just like the example of the broken arm, you're not going to try and fix a broken arm on your own. It's okay to reach out and get help and have someone kind of sit down with you and kind of assess where things are, and that's, I think, really important.
One thing I've observed for some folks, it doesn't manifest in withdrawal, it manifests in risk-taking.
Yes.
Sure.
And kind of just the opposite. It's taking things to the opposite extreme in terms of reaching out and pushing out and taking risks, and that they would not otherwise do. But I guess the commonality there is that it's a different behavior than one expects from oneself, or that they normally exhibit.
And normal is a funny word in this conversation, because there is no normal. It really varies by person. Maybe you're someone that's always been very active, so risk-taking behavior may be kind of the norm, that wouldn't signal anything out of the ordinary. In fact, not being that way would signal something, or someone who's very outgoing suddenly becoming much more withdrawn and isolated. So it can be just changes, but it can also be things that people notice are just really unhealthy, and maybe that's always been there, and it's just time to do something about that. And
we've had a lot of conversation where we work, and Joe can articulate a little bit better on this, but with increased anxiety, with increased depression, as you were talking about the risk-taking, we're seeing, or maybe with social media being so readily and with the news so readily, we're seeing more and more people taking those risky behaviors, going to the nth degree to gain that attention. It's that almost that cry for help. And so Joe can articulate a little bit more on that, but that's also another avenue, is paying attention to those risky behaviors that, as you were saying, outside the norm or that are different. And that's a good time to be able to have that conversation and seek treatment as well.
If you've always been a skydiver, it's not going to be strange if you go out and do it some more.
Right. And Joe can talk about this social media aspect with teens and going a little further on that.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit after the break. I think on the recognition, I'll come into the break with one little story. I have a friend who'd had a serious wildfire had blown by her house. They were in danger. It was a very stressful situation. About a week or so later, she learned of a fire that was potentially threatening a friend. And when I talked to her, and I could get the anxiety in her communication, I said, no, you have PTSD. You are reacting to what happened to you, and you're overreacting to this. And so that kind of overreaction is really, I think, a hallmark of PTSD. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's it's kind of an overreacting to what could otherwise be a normal stimulus, but because of what has happened to you in the past. I think that's something that people think of PTSD has to be something really, really extreme, battlefield fatigue, but lots of things can trigger a stress reaction that we can all need to be aware of.
It's individualized.
And it doesn't have to be, like you said, something major, because it can really be any event that someone felt threatened that their life or harm to them was going to occur. And so it's something that I think a lot more people experience than they recognize. I think we talk a lot about trauma and trauma-informed care, meaning we're recognizing that throughout a person's life they experience different traumas, and often, again, it's expected that, you just need to deal with that and you just need to handle it. And a lot of times people really do need an avenue to be able to explore that and what it meant to them and why it was so scary, and be able to talk it through to gain more understanding.
Sometimes that identification, it makes it possible to collect it and set it aside to move forward.
Right.
Which is a piece of that. So we'll come back and talk about how people can identify and set some of these things aside and really deal with it, what that treatment might look like.
Sounds great.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Welcome to Tom Sawyer Country Coffee.
Tom Sawyer Country Coffee only roasts the finest organic coffee for our signature blends. Enjoy a cup at our coffee shop and local businesses and organizations across the region.
I'm Tom Sawyer, and we choose the Pacific Northwest.
Last year alone, Avista customers saved over 53 million kilowatt hours of energy. Enough to power more than 4,000 homes for an entire year. Way to save, everyone. way to save. Find your way to save at avistautilities.com.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
Okay, well, we're back. I think we're gonna move from kind of the identification into some of the coping mechanisms. I know there was one little bit you wanted to get in there on social media and teens and mental health and how that works in it. So let's start there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting as we've noticed an increase across the community, certainly in suicides and things that, really more escalating behaviors in youth. What we're finding is an increase in anxiety and depression across the board, and it really affects all kids. They can be the 4.0 students that are really involved in things. They can be, students that just living their life day to day. They're maybe average grades. But what we're finding is that increase across the board in depression and anxiety really is impacting them in a negative way. We see a lot of teens shutting down and really struggling from a day to day, and we're recognizing that this is the first generation to really grow up with smartphones. These are the kids who are graduating now. If you think of the timeline when
information
they started,
overload.
This is when they've really started experiencing this, and kind of equate it to a high-powered executive. They're reachable all the time. Phone's always ringing. There's always somebody trying to get a hold of them, a decision that needs to be made, and that anxiety and pressure to not just perform well in school so they can get into the right college if that's what they're wanting to do, or the right job, but it's that constantly being reachable and look at all, everybody else's life seems to be great. I look at all these postings and wow, they have all these friends, and look at me, I'm just sitting here on a Friday evening doing nothing, So it's much more in their face and much more, just constant pressure. And I think that has really obviously led to an increase in more of that anxiety and depression with teens. And again, we're just seeing really high performing kids who normally would have been the valedictorians, and they can't go to school for a week at a time because they can't get out of bed because the anxiety is so bad. And so it's those are, again, some of the things that we're noticing in the community.
Well, maybe instead of Throwback Thursday, we need to start a Mental Health Monday. Post something that's not going right so that everybody knows you're normal.
I like
or
the
just take
concept.
Take a break.
Take a break. Yeah.
Mental Health Mondays. That's great. That's very innovative.
So going on to, now that we've identified, we have all these sources of stress and anxiety, we've talked about some of the signs and symptoms. Psychiatric Solutions is about, what do you do to try to address this? Can you fix it? Can you just monitor it chronically? Is there's probably a continuum? What are some things you'd like to tell people?
Well, I think the continuum is what you notice or what you just mentioned is really important, because oftentimes in a community we have pretty good outpatient clinicians. We have good therapists out there in the community. We have good psychiatrists and psychologists who are out there. Seems like there's never enough of them. It's hard to get in.
I think that's true of many specialties.
Exactly. and so what happens is we kind of shift from a model of, well, okay, things start not going well, and if that's not working, we often go to an inpatient stay, which again, so grateful to have those services available when you have them. And crisis services in the meantime to get you there. But there's kind of a missing level of care where we want to try and avoid the hospitalization. Or if someone's coming out of a hospital stay, it's difficult to just go right back into your life as though nothing happened. And so what Psychiatric Solutions provides is kind of that mid-level of care. We have partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs that are all about kind of covering that middle period of crisis or treatment needs, when on an outpatient basis it's not quite enough and not quite ready to, or don't need the level of inpatient care. So that's really kind of what we're focused on, and we're working kind of in an integrated manner with their primary care doctor, if they do have a therapist in the community, to work with that therapist or psychiatrist to provide that appropriate level of care, the right level of care at the right time, and then we want to get them back in the community, because that's the goal. We don't want them to have to come and see us again. We don't want them to have to experience this. We want to send them back with, hopefully, some of the things that we've been talking about, skills and self-awareness and ability to kind of monitor themselves when they get out and know, I'm not doing very well. Oh yeah, I got to do these things again. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not doing the fun things that I used to enjoy in life. I got to do those again. And ways for people to just kind of monitor how they're doing, being much more self-aware and being able to manage on an outpatient basis. So that's really kind of one area that we focus in, and we also provide psychiatry and medication services.
And I noticed on your website that you it's beyond just the psychiatrist, but you have a range of providers, and so I'm assuming they're providing different kinds of services. What's kind of that range of services?
So I mentioned the partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs. We have licensed therapists that run those programs, and the nice thing is they allow people to go home at night. You're there for 4 to 6 hours.
Well, that's what you mean by partial hospital.
Correct. Okay. Yes. I'm sorry. I should explain that better. But as you
day camp.
In a way, yeah, you're getting the
mental
right
health day camp.
Mental health day
right
camp.
care,
Okay.
yeah, right care, and you're able to go home at night. You're able to be with your family,
Right.
And both the partial hospitalization and the intensive outpatient, they're kind of a step down from each other. Provide that opportunity. So that's one aspect. The psychiatry, we have both a nurse practitioner and a psychiatrist on board to prescribe. And then we also have what's called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, and that provides another level of care when perhaps medications have not been as effective or helpful. Maybe they've tried multiple antidepressants and they don't seem to be having an impact. TMS is kind of like an MRI. It uses magnetic pulses to stimulate parts of the brain to kind of re-engage that part of the brain and
wake them up and get them going.
In a way, yes, and help them to kind of see color again in their life and be able to engage. And for people who've experienced many years of depression, it's a really amazing experience for them to be able to experience it for the first time after so many years. And patient often describe it as seeing color again and waking up. So those are good analogies of some of that. So great technology, and it's FDA approved for depression. So
and the beautiful thing about TMS is that it's non-invasive, and you're not putting medicine in your body, and you can go right back to work. So you come in for a treatment, and then you just turn right back to work or school. And the key component for Psychiatric Solutions with our medication management and our therapies and psychiatric care is it's medically monitored, it's evidence-based programming. And so we really have a lot of that science coupled with that personal healing. So happiness starts here. Your mental health journey is taking a new path to healing. And it's a key component for us to really involve your home life, your work life, and all of those support systems in your journey, so that when you come and get treatment, you're able to go back to work, school, home, church, and take those skills with you as you improve on that journey.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that support systems. How do you involve like the patient's family or work area to be part of this? How do you help them get past the stigma to be able to be part of the solution for the patient?
That's a great question. We're squashing the stigma, we're having the conversation, and we involve the family. So we have a tour. The family is invited to go along with the tour and meet the clinicians. They can come and walk through the facility. We can involve them if we need to in the treatment plan. So we have some services, the Rapp Services, so they can have an action plan if they start to have increased symptoms. They have an action plan to recognize if they're starting to have more depression, the inability to sleep, and we're involving the family during that time as well. When you're in our facility, we can also have the ability to do the medication management on site. We're also doing vital signs. We're taking your temperature, your height, your weight, so we know that if something's going on with your blood pressure, that we're also able to communicate with the family if need be. We're able to communicate with your medical home, either your psychiatrist or your primary care doc. And then most importantly is we can pull them out and they can have that individual time if they need to as well with our clinicians.
So you do actively encourage patients then to involve family or to make sure they have somebody, because one of the So I was in a car accident once, and I was, as an EMT, I was a really, really bad patient, and I was in the ER being bossy until the doctor said, we don't let the person with the head injury make the decisions. And so I remember that when we're talking about mental health, is that sometimes someone who is having that issue, there are times when the doctor needs to say, you don't get to make the decisions. Yeah. But so there's a need, I think, to really involve someone who deals with a mental health issue, to have, okay, who's going to be your posse? Who's going to be who's your backup?
Well, we don't live in a vacuum,
No.
We all live in various systems. Your family system, people you interact with there. You go to work and you've got people there. That's another system. You have a group of friends. That's another system. So we're really involved in a lot of different systems. And even if you're someone who is fairly isolated and don't have a lot of connections, maybe there's people online that you connect with. So we all have some kind of system that we're connected to. And they're really an important part of seeing what's going on, and they can share important feedback. They used to do this all the time. They don't do it anymore. And I guess I didn't realize I wasn't doing that anymore. So, it's helpful to have that feedback, certainly, to the system, because it keeps it open and transparent. And that's really, there's a desire to kind of hide, like I said, if you're embarrassed, you don't want to talk about all those things, and getting it out and being really open is a really important part of being able to say, yeah, let's just address this, let's work on it head on.
Yeah, so part of curing the stigma has to be helping the patient have people around them that have got past that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we've had those conversations of, we were talking about the construction worker or the person that is working at Kaiser Aluminum or Walmart or, in the, Department of Transportation. We want people to know that it's okay to start having that conversation of, something's just not right. I'm having a hard time dealing. And to make that safe environment and that safe conversation happen. And when we start having those conversations, if I had a broken finger, I would go get it fixed, or a broken arm. Now, let's make it okay. Something's not right, and I'm having a hard time dealing with your example with the fire, and I'm feeling these feelings of panic and trauma. So breaking the stigma, having the conversation, and then seeking the treatment and doing things well for yourself and for others is the key to making this more mainstream.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap this on that theme. We want to cure the stigma. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, so be aware of how your own mental health is doing, and
visit our website for more information.
Psychiatric Solutions has a great website with a lot of links to resources and a blog and some information to help, just to help us realize this is normal. And since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, look somebody in the eye and ask them, how are you really doing?
That's right.
And listen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Better Health with Sulani Madsen is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Better Health is brought to you in part by Sleep Better Northwest. Ask Sulani a question, recommend a guest or topic, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Cheers to Better Health, and thanks for listening.